Joining me in Edmonton, Alberta at Breakforth Canada 2017 is Andy Steiger. He is the founder and director of Apologetics Canada, an organization dedicated to helping churches both engage and understand our culture. Andy is also the author of Thinking, Answering Life's 5 Biggest Questions. He's also currently a PhD candidate at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. Andy, welcome once again to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you. It's good to be with you guys again.
So Andy, tell me, what is the biggest question people struggle with today?
You know, it's funny you ask that because I get that question quite a bit. You know, what is the question? In the book that I wrote, Thinking, Answering Life's 5 Biggest Questions, the 5 big ones are: what's the meaning of life? Does God exist? Do all religions lead to God? Why is there evil? And is there life after death? Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to ask, okay, of those 5, what's the biggest one? Without question, as I've had conversations with people, and even when you look at philosophy and theology, what's the question people struggle with? Why is there evil? That has been the question. And so it's been interesting because as you go and you speak at different places, that question will come up over and over again in a variety of different forms.
Now, is there a simple answer to that question? Why is there evil?
You know, I think that's the challenge of the question, and why it is the biggest question is because it's a question that's not just an intellectual question. It's a question of the heart. Evil is not just something that we know about. Evil is something that we've all experienced and are experiencing. And so I think that the answer to that question is both head and heart, and it's a journey all at the same time. So I would direct you to my book.
Well, you know, you mentioned the word intellectual.
Yeah.
And there are some people who, from an apologetic perspective, don't necessarily believe that the intellectual argument works, that it's going to bring people to Jesus. Interesting, I wish I could write it, but I've read a book on by Norman Geisler on the Jesus being an apologist, and he's got some great interesting material in there, how Jesus communicated with people, and there's also that intellectual perspective. And so what's your thinking, what's your feeling on people that sort of challenge the apologetic means of convincing people that Jesus is the way?
I'm convinced that we as the church need to be careful because we tend to be on a pendulum swing from one extreme to the other. So we've gone through periods of the church where we've been heavy intellectually and we lose the heart. Right. We've been in other pendulum swings where I'd say we currently are, where we're all heart and no head. And so what we need to appreciate about Christianity is that it is a head and heart faith. And it's connecting the two. And in fact, Jesus says, when he talks about the greatest commandment, he says that the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And really what he's saying is that a whole person, love God with your whole person, and a whole person is both the head and the heart. These two need to be connected, and in Christianity, they are. And both are respected. So where I would push back is I would say you need the heart and you need the head. Right. And it concerns me sometimes that people don't appreciate that Christianity has a robust intellectual tradition of great thinkers and feelers. And we need to do both, and we got to do both great.
You know, the message that apologetics communicates is, of course, the person of Jesus. And you've said that, and I'm quoting you, the challenge in Western culture today is communicating the message of Jesus in a way that people can both understand and appreciate. And so my question is, do you feel, are we getting better at communicating Jesus today?
I think that we're getting better. Yeah, I like to be optimistic about it, and I think that we've learned from some of our mistakes in the past. One of the ways that I look at it, and this is one of the reasons why I think people get it wrong often, is they forget, how you communicate. See, if you want to become a missionary, all missionaries know that you need to learn 2 things. You need to learn the language, and you got to learn the culture. And I think a lot of us just assume because we're living in the West that we know the language and we know the culture, but oftentimes we don't. And when that's the case, we don't communicate the gospel clearly. And so what the church really needs to continue to do is to learn the culture that they're in. What's the culture of Canada? What's the culture of the city, the community, the town that they're in? And then begin to understand that in the language that's being spoken so that they're relevant, that they can communicate clearly the message of the gospel.
Well, you mentioned one of the things that are challenging culture today is this idea of dehumanization. Yeah. What is that?
I'm glad that you brought that up because I have a project. Apologetics Canada is going into a new project. We have a video series that's going to be launching soon. We're filming this summer. That's called The Human Project. And what we're talking about is dehumanization, which is a huge issue in our culture today. By dehumanization, I simply mean the viewing or seeing a person as less than human. And this happens in two ways. Lots of art. By the way, psychology currently is just exploding with articles on dehumanization. Dehumanization takes place in one of two ways, either to remove a person's human uniqueness or to remove a person's human nature. And by that, it simply means to remove a person's human uniqueness is to equate them as an animal. To remove their nature is to equate them as an object. And this is taking place in our culture in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, give me a couple of examples how you see that.
Yeah, one of the ways that we have to be so cautious is the way that we talk about one another, the words that we use. For example, in Nazi Germany, they referred to the Jews as rats. In the genocide of Rwanda, the Hutu called the Tutsis cockroaches. Today, you'll often hear the police referred to as pigs and criminals as dogs. We'll use language that dehumanizes people, and the thing that we've got to be aware of is that begins to change the way we see people. And here's the part that gets concerning, is when your view of a person begins to become less than human, you can be capable of doing horrendous things to that person because they're no longer a person.
Okay, I see.
So here's something to think about. History teaches that people do not murder people. History consistently shows that people will first dehumanize them. They will first make them something less than human, and then they can kill them. For example, if you could go back in time and grab a Nazi and say, don't you think killing people is wrong? They would say, absolutely killing people is wrong. But then they would qualify that and say, but the Jews aren't people. And we've seen this with the Hutu, but the Tutsis aren't people. You know, and what happens is their perspective of humanity has become distorted. And as that takes place, they become capable of killing people because they're not killing people any longer. Their perspective is so distorted.
Right.
And we're seeing that taking place in our culture right now in a variety of ways. I mean, pornography is another way that takes place.
So basically looking at a human as not human, but as an animal, and therefore I can hurt them.
Or an object, yeah. So now all of a sudden, nobody has a problem with squishing a cockroach, right? Nobody's mourning over the loss of a cockroach. And what we found historically, you know, is you go into these places where genocide has taken place and you expect to find a monster.
Yeah.
You know, that did these horrendous crimes, and what you find is actually a fairly normal person whose perspective of humanity has become distorted.
So as an apologist, how would you take the message of Jesus, and let me ask it this way, and appeal to their mind, the intellect, and then bring it down to where their heart can be open to Jesus?
Yeah, this is the thing I love about Christianity, is that in Jesus you find the melding of both the head and the heart. As Jesus taught about the significance of people, and more than that Jesus was willing to give his life for people. Jesus did the greatest act of humanization that there is. He gave his life for people, demonstrating that people are of infinite value. That God not only created the universe, but God created human life for the purpose of right relationship with himself. And he was willing to die to see that restored. Because that's just how valuable people are. That's the good news of Christianity. That's the gospel message. God loves you and sees you for who you really are. And that's the human project. The human project is for us to begin to see people the way God sees people. The human project is to begin to see ourselves the way God sees us. The infinite value and the meaning and the purpose that we have in him.
You know, Andy, those watching, I just want to encourage them that maybe they are one of those people. And if what Andy has talked about, not necessarily affecting your mind, but bringing that right down to your heart, Jesus has the answer to all of your questions, and he's the one that can bring a change in your life. And I would just encourage you to pick up your phone and call the number on your screen there. There's a prayer partner there that's willing to talk with you and pray with you. Andy, thank you so very much. I know apologetics, it speaks well to my heart. I appreciate it, your ministry and what you're doing, and may God continue to bless you. And thank you so much for sharing on 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to be with you.
God bless you, Andy.